أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Amma ba'd, sisters and brothers in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for the holy month of Ramadan and give us all the tawfiq to fulfill our duty in the best of manner. We have been looking at the brief Tafsir of Suratu l-Insan, and just to connect with the earlier ayat, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا إنا خلقنا الإنسان من نطفة أمشاج نبتليه فجعلناه سميعا بصيرا. Basically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins with a kind of a statement which should make us as human beings humble, where He says, didn't come upon the human a period of time when he was not worth mentioning. And then he goes on to say, and we surely created the human being from a sperm drop, again making us realize that this is the wonders of His creation. But remember, it was a very insignificant beginning, changing him until He made him hearing and seeing, gave him the faculties to acquire knowledge. Then we come to the ayat for tonight, inshallah. Inna hadaynahu as-sabil imma shakiran wa imma kafura. We surely guided him onto the path, whether he becomes thankful or becomes ungrateful. This is what is to be seen. When we look at this process, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the creation, He emphasizes the issue of فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا, until we made him seeing and hearing and seeing. Now, we have to realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala singles out these two things just as an example. Basically, there are five senses that He's given to us, whether it is the smell or the taste or the touch or the hearing or the sight. But hearing and sight has been singled out here. And these are the five senses which are used as tools to acquire knowledge. We get the information through this, and then we send it to our mind, and there it is processed. And based on that, synchronization of the information that the mind does, you come to the conclusion and the natija. And that conclusion is known as ilm. So these five senses are basically tools to acquire information gathering. And then it is the mind which actually analyzes that and brings to the conclusion. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically talks about that soon after creation. إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ أَمْشَاجٍ نَبْتَلِيهِ, changing him in one form to another in the womb of the mother, until we made him complete. فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. These two elements basically are kind of preparing the ground for the ayat of tonight, إِنَّ هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ. Because before he talks about hidayat, he should, equip us with the ability to observe the hidayat. And that is where the issue of Sami'an Basiran comes before it. And so if I look at these two ayats, again, those of you who are familiar with my work on the explanatory translation of the Quran, whatever you see in the italics are the words added by me to make the meaning and the context more clear. So we can read this ayat in a slightly different way here. After creation, we surely guided him onto the right path. And now it is entirely upon him, whether he becomes thankful by following it, or becomes ungrateful by ignoring it. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically is talking about a very important ni'mat that He has given to us. And that is the ni'mat of ikhtiyar. He has not created us as robots. He has given us the choice as far as our actions are concerned. And so let us look at the issue of this guidance that Allah has given to us and the freedom of choice given to the human beings. Another similar ayat, Inna hadinahu sabil imma shakiran wa imma kafura, would be the earlier ayat from Surah Shams. And we have looked at it, we have talked about this many times, that whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses qasam, when He says, I swear by this and that, this is not the swear word from the Canadian language, It means, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, by this and by that, this qasam always comes before a very important statement that He would like to make. Although this is kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah is talking to human beings. And so there is no way but to address human beings the way they know the language or the style. And we also sometimes, when we don't have a proof and we want to emphasize somebody to someone that I'm really truthful, what do? Qasam. Although sometimes it could be false. But that is how we express that emphasis that no, this is really true, this is very important, we do qasam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the same style. And so in this Surah Shams that we recite in Namaz Eid mostly, you will see it's amazing how He begins with so many qasam. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا. I can remember it for Eid inshallah. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَاهَا وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا طَحَاهَا. After وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا. So we have about 7 statements which is qasam. By the sun, then He talks about the moon, by the day and then the night, and then He talks about the heaven and the earth, and then He talks about the soul of the human being, the most precious of His creation. Then He comes to the process. This is the statements that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to make, and these were all preamble, qasams, one after another. And what is the statement? فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. He says, this soul of the human being, I have inspired to it what is evil for it and what is good for it. And this is where we see that the process of hidayat and guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is given to every human being. Their nafs, their soul has the capability of receiving the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes when we use these words, which are technical words, but related to their literal meaning also, we describe people as Muslim, and the opposite of that is kafir. The literal meaning of kafir means what? Somebody who covers something. When you do cover your beard, the gray hair, with your dye, you are actually doing kufr. Technically speaking. So you're hiding something. A kafir is known as a kafir. So that's somebody who doesn't believe in God, okay? But it is related to the word kufr. It means that even his nafs has the potential of accepting the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he is putting a lid on it. He is concealing it. And therefore a kafir is known as a kafir. And so this is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when it comes to all the nufus of human being, all the souls, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, He has given it the ability, to know, accept this guidance, to know what is right and what is wrong. And then He concludes, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Successful is the person who keeps that soul purified and is able to seek the guidance and see the light. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. And failure is the person who lets it, taint it, and he is not able to then seek the light and the guidance from it. And so this issue is there where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلِ, we have guided him to the path. The right path is known. And this is where, and when He uses the term إِمَّا شَاكِرًا وَإِمَّا كَفُورًا, of course here kafur is in the meaning of being ungrateful. Kufrane ni'mat, as we call it. Now, this guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided to us can be of two levels. One is internal guidance. And this is where Allah says, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Through the soul or the conscious and the faculty of aql and reasoning that He has given to us. This is known as hidayat fitri. Then on an external level, we have two levels of that. External guidance, one is hidayat takwini, in a sense that when you see the signs of Allah's power and majesty in the creation, whether it's your own body or even what is outside. And there is also what is known as hidayat tashri'i, which came in form of the Anbiya and Mursaleen and the holy books. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I am not forcing you, I have not created you as robots. I have given you the potential, and there is a level that you can reach, a very high level. But you have to work and walk on that path by yourself. Do not underestimate yourself. Do not give a lower value. You are much, much higher than what you think. Unfortunately, as I said, we have to ask this question: is the dunya for us, or are we for the dunya? If we know our worth, then we will know the right answer there. There is another verse which emphasizes the same point, that Allah only provides the guidance, doesn't force us to walk on it. He wants to see whether we become grateful and shakir, or we become ungrateful and kafur. And this is the famous ayat from Ayat al-Kursi, لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. The meaning is very clear. There is no compulsion in religion. Now many of our people say, so whether I do namaz or not, there is no compulsion. Whether I put on the hijab or not, and mashallah, these are all Google mushtahideen. They don't even understand the context of that. The ayat is not really talking about Muslims as such. What is saying that the deen and religion cannot be imposed on others by force. You cannot force people to become Muslims. These jihadis are completely, far away from Quran. They don't know. They think by creating fear in the hearts of the people, they will start saying, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. No. You're not creating Muslimin, you are actually increasing the number of munafiqeen by that way. You cannot force a religion on people. And this is the reason why Islam so strongly says there is no compulsion in a religion, in a sense, in accepting religion. Because Islam is so confident of itself, قَدْ تَبَيَّنَ الرُّشْدُ مِنَ الْغَيِّ, because the right path is distinct from the crooked one. Anybody studies that, unbiasedly, they will see the light and they will come to the conclusion. Of course, if they have their own preconceived ideas, propaganda, or the veils on their hearts and souls, that's another problem. But if somebody who is, unbiased looks at Islam the way it is, they will see the truth and they will accept it. So remember, this ayat is not talking about, the laws of Islam are not mandatory on Muslims. If you want to look at that, you should go to another ayat of Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that a mu'min and a mu'mina. It covered both genders. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a Rasul have made a decision on an issue about them, they don't have khayara, they don't have ikhtiyar, no choice on it. If namaz is wajib, it is wajib. You cannot say that, well, I will decide whether it is wajib for me or not. And so this la ikraha fi din again is reinforcing this idea in hadaynahu sabil, that we have guided the human being to the path, the right path. Either now he will be grateful and follow it, or he will be ungrateful by just ignoring it and staying away from it. And unfortunately, this idea of jabr, compulsion in the matters of religion, then have come out in the Muslim history in different ways. There is a school of thought influenced by Banu Umayyah, who believe actually that whatever we do, whatever human beings do, is actually the doing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'll come to this later on. Invented by Banu Umayyah in order to justify their own atrocities against the people, so that they will be, quiet on this issue. And this is where we see that, especially when it comes to the Maliki and Hanbali and Shafi, schools of thought, they actually say you are not allowed to rebel against your Khalifa or ruler, even if he openly commits sins. Even if he's fasiq, zalim, doesn't matter. They actually say it is obligatory to bear the tyranny of the ruler patiently. The reason why they don't like the Shias is because Shias don't believe in that. When they have the opportunity to stand up against zulm, they would stand up. And so this is part of the Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali school of thought. I'm not sure at the moment, what is the stand of Hanafis. But this is where you have to realize that when it comes to actions, we don't believe there is jabr from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A human being is responsible for his or her own actions. And this is where the hidayat is there as just the way of showing the path. There was a very interesting, conversation. Can you call Rehan? Yeah. Oh, he's outside. Okay. Anyway. Can you put this into presenter's view rather than what it is now? Salawat There is actually an interesting conversation between Abu Hanifa, the founder of the Hanafi school of thought, and Imam Musa al-Kazim alayhi salam, when he was still a young child, a young boy, I would say. Basically, he was more a resident of Iraq, and in his visits to Medina once, he was with somebody who told him that, from Ali Muhammad there is an alim from that family, and let us go and see him. Maybe we'll learn something. And so he went to the house with this fellow, to the house of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wa salam. And he was basically standing outside waiting either to get the permission to go inside, or they were waiting for the Imam to come out. We are not sure. But while he was waiting, and the others also were waiting with Abu Hanifa and this other fellow, they saw a young boy came out. And everybody basically, greeted that boy and showed him respect, which was unusual, because all elders and he is a young person. So Abu Hanifa asked his companion, he says, who is this? He says, Huwa ibnuhu Musa. This is the son of Imam Musa al-Kazim, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. His name is Musa. So he said that, I will go and I'll go and ask him some questions while we are waiting for his father, because I would like to, in a way, humiliate the Ali Muhammad. His companion said, don't do this, don't try this. He said, well, I'll do that. It's okay. It's fine. I just want to use the Arabic words on my notes, but that's fine. Let it be. So he, called the young Imam, and basically then he asked him, "Min man al-ma'siyah?" From whom comes the sins? Who is responsible for the sins? The Lord or the person? And that's where I think we can still have the English ones here. Anyway, let's just go back to it. So he asked this question to the Imam, and he said, "Min man al-ma'siyah?" Ma'siyah means guna, sins. Who is responsible for it? Is it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is it the human being? I think it's number 7. Yeah. And that's where Imam, still very young, just looked at him and he said, there are 3 possibilities only. There's no ayat of Quran, no hadith, nothing. He says, logically speaking, there are only 3 possibilities. Either the sin is from Allah only. He says, in this case, then it is unjust for Allah to punish His slave for having done nothing. Then Allah is responsible for whatever sins that we are committing, if we are just robots in His hand. And then he says, okay, the second possibility is that it is from the person and Allah together. Then Imam says that it is unfair for the stronger partner to punish the weaker one for the same sin, if they were all involved in it. And this is where Imam then says that we are left with the third option, and that is that the sins are only product of the human being. And then Allah may forgive him or punish him as He wishes. And this is where we come to realize that, this is a very logical way of looking at it. 3 possibilities, ending with the third one. Because adl, justice is very important part of the Shia theology. And we cannot accept the first or the second possibilities, because it is unjust and unfair. And this is where, according to the companion of Abu Hanifa, he says, he was just silent, didn't have anything to say. And I told him, don't try to provoke them. Otherwise, you will see this kind of response. And if you look at the historians of Muslim theology, there's a very good book written in Urdu by a very prominent Sunni scholar of the last century, Maulana Shibli Nu'mani from India. And he actually has a book, Ilm al-Kalam, which is actually not on Ilm Kalam, it's actually history of theology, not a theology by itself. And there he is very clear about it. He says, if you look at this concept of jabr and compulsion, as far as the human's actions are concerned, that this is compelled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever we do, we are not responsible. Allah is responsible. It says this was invented during the days of Banu Umayyah, so that they could appease the masses whenever they became very angry with the zulm of Banu Umayyah and his government. And so their ulama of Darbar will go around and say, baby, don't blame him. He is just a tool, a pen in the hands of Allah. Whatever he's doing to you, it's not his doing, it's his doing. This is how they would keep them calm. And that has actually come into the theological thoughts of the Sunni school of thought. And this is where there is a very famous saying which reflects that, where it says, Al-Jabr wa Tashbih Umawiyan, and then Wal-Adl wa Tawheed Alawiyan. There's a concept of Jabr and compulsion in human actions, and this idea of, giving tashbih to Allah in human form. These are invention of Banu Umayyah, whereas the concept of Adl and Tawheed actually comes from the ideas of Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. So we'll end with that discussion of Inna Hadaynahu Sabil, Imma Shakiran wa Imma Kafura. As I had mentioned, inshallah, we will be talking about one or two masail at the end regarding the Jamaat prayers. Last night we talked about the importance of the Ma'mumeen following the Imam. These are a couple of slides from the Saturday lectures that I give in fiqh. This is relevant to the Jamaat prayers, that when it comes to the actions, the Ma'mum has to follow the Imam in all actions. You do not go ahead of the Imam, whether in takbir or going into ruku or going into sajda, getting up from the sajda. And if this is done intentionally by anyone, goes ahead of the Imam intentionally, then his Jama'at will be batil and invalid, but he will still be able to continue his namaz in the Furada form, which means that now the rules of Furada will be applied on him. Of course, some people not intentionally, but adatan, habitually go ahead of the Imam in actions. That does not harm, but it is adat-e-bad. Buri adat hai. You have to reform yourself if you are into that adat and habit. So this is what we talked yesterday. But now looking at the recitations, this was about actions. When it comes to the recitations, I'm going to talk only about the first and the second rakat tonight. We'll talk about the other actions and stages later on. See, there are two types of namaz that we have, the five namaz as far as the Jamaat is concerned. Zuhrain are ikhfati. Ikhfati means the surahs are recited silently. And when it comes to Zuhrain, so even the Imam would be silent. The only thing we emphasize in the Shia Mazhab is highly recommended to say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim loud. And so the Imam who is reciting the surah in Jama'at will say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim if he wants, loudly, but the rest of the surah would be silently. And so what would be the duty of the Ma'mumeen? It is obligatory, wajib on them to refrain from reciting surahs. And it is recommended for them, because I get this question many times, okay Maulana, the Pesh Namaz is reciting the surah on his own silently, we can't hear him, so our mind is wandering here and there. Everything that we forgot before, we remember it in namaz. Shaitan doesn't leave us alone. And so what do we do? This is where it is recommended then you recite tasbih or zikr. Subhanallah walhamdulillah or la ilaha illallah. And so you are in a way still focused and concentrating on the namaz. But when it comes to Fajr and Maghrib and Isha, the rulings are different now. The Imam would actually recite the surahs loudly. And if you are able to hear the Imam even faintly, now we are talking about the days when we didn't have, pin mics. It was otherwise here, everybody can hear it. It's no issue of, whether I'm a soft-spoken person like me, I think I am, or then as opposed to somebody who doesn't need a mic at all. So if, because we are using, mics and all the system, audio, video, everybody can hear. So as long as you can even hear the voice of the Imam faintly, then you must remain silent and listen to the qiraat of the surah by the Imam. If you can't hear the Imam's voice even faintly, then you are allowed to recite the surah silently, or you just remain, silent. In this case, reciting will be preferable, but recite it silently. This is only if you cannot hear the voice of the Imam. And this is important for ma'mumeen, especially sometimes I'm told in the ladies' side, even in Namaz Jummah, they recite the whole Surah Jummah with the Imam. Well, you're not supposed to recite. This is the whole issue of when it comes to the Imam al-Jamaat. It is a matter of discipline. It is the matter of, learning how to maintain this issue of being obedient. This ruling itself, why silently in Zuhr and Asr and why loudly in Fajr and Maghrib and Isha, probably there is no scientific reason for it. Maybe it's just a training. The namaz is a training for each one of us. That do it the way you have been told. Don't do it the way you feel like it. So in Fajr and Maghrib and Isha, recite the surah loudly. In Zuhr and Asr, be silent. Is there a logical reason for it, so-called, or scientific reason? We don't know. Maybe the whole reason is that we get this training of being obedient to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is something that we have to keep in mind at all the time. So remember, in Namaz al-Jamaat, especially in the namaz where when it comes to the issue of Fajr and Maghrib and Isha, if you can hear the voice of the Imam, you have to be silent and you have to listen. You do not recite the surahs. We'll end with that. We still have about 2-3 minutes, so maybe I'll take one question. Yes. That's not part of qiraat. We'll come to that later. That's part of zikr. Tomorrow, inshallah. Yeah. According to the majority view, basically, because one of the conditions of the Imam al-Jamaat is that they should be mu'min. Now, one of the definitions of mu'min is that they have to be Shia. So you can still do this niyyat, but ahkam of Jamaat would not apply. You still have to recite the surah. And if it is Fajr and Maghrib and Isha, in that situation, apparently you are with the Jamaat, but then your niyyat was something else as far as ahkam is concerned. So you have to recite the surah silently. Not only that, even sometimes we have situations where you say, well, I don't really consider this Imam to be adil, pesh namaz. What do we do? Some people actually, while the Jamaat is going on, will go a little bit far away and do their Jamaat, their namaz alone. They do not realize that this is not the right thing to do. According to the late Imam Khomeini, he used to say his namaz is batil. According to other Maraji, including Ayatollah Sistani, he says his namaz is okay, but he is committing a sin. Because by doing the namaz away from the Jamaat at the same time, you are actually making a statement. You are proclaiming publicly now that in my eyes this Imam is not adil, and that is not acceptable. So even if you don't believe that Imam to be adil, you still join in with the Jamaat, do the niyat of furada, don't stand in the first line then. Join in, recite your own surahs, but you recite the surahs silently. Yes? You just join them. Yes. Yeah. But you do your surahs yourself. Yeah. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.